Welcome back to another Reading and Correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 72 of Stepping Wild. Guards were how the people in charge kept control of the city, so they were who Tibs needed to undermine. Undermining them to the citizen would be done through the nimble roamer, showing they weren't particularly competent, but he also needed to turn the guards against their employer. That would be done by taking away the coins used to pay them. They couldn't go for the tax office. The city rulers would lay the blame at the feet of the city folks. There would also be too much money in those coffers. For one theft to do anything, he'd be at it for years before the effect showed. What he had to do was take the coins after they were assigned as payments for the guards, but before they received them. There were too many guards for them to go to the city offices to receive their pay. Bags were sent to each of the 34 guardhouses throughout the city where the guards assigned there received their coins. He couldn't wait until they reached the guardhouse, since the distribution started immediately, and there would be too many guards, too many people. He also couldn't take them at the city office. The number of bags made that impractical, and all the guards that would escort the clerks carrying them to their destination would be present. That left while they were in motion. They'd be escorted, but in a busy city like Toleres, distractions would be simple to arrange, especially now that he had fever. What he couldn't do was make a show of taking the coins. It couldn't be possible for anyone to know something had happened until they started paying the guards. That eliminated nearly every easy method he had access to. He couldn't dissipate the essence that made the coins, and nimble Romer couldn't drop in and take them. And there needed to be something in the bag to be handed to the guard, something that could be a message a message by itself. One that couldn't be ignored even as he couldn't get to all the bags. One that didn't say, "We've been robbed," but said, "You aren't worth much. You aren't worth as much as those other guards over there, which still receive silver as they pay, while you only got copper." Guards were paid every 9th day. That left him time for his research. Getting into the library might not be as simple as walking in, it rarely was. Even showing scholarly credential might not be enough, considering how controlled everything was, but a scholar arriving from the platform, no, that wouldn't work. Unlike cities, where that was the main way people with money traveled, it was too rare here to go unnoticed or easy to check. It would have to be by caravan, and that was only slightly more complicated to make appear true. A newly arrived scholar couldn't be expected to know how the city worked. His first step consisted of building his scholarly wardrobe. Not all scholars dressed well, but those who traveled at quains and often needed their status as scholar on display for ease of access. They didn't go for needless display of wealth the way nobles did, since even great scholars didn't have the coins to waste on that, but the fabrics would be made to survive travel while still being fine and comfortable. The satchel sturdy, the inkpot and quill case resistant to breakage. It was the rare scholar Tibbs had encountered who could afford magic as protection for their tools, but they would spend as much of their coins on making sure they were protected. Those coins came from nobles' pockets as they wandered away from their neighborhood, With so many guards everywhere, the work was more difficult, but Tibs had time and the ability to sense where the guards stood by the metal in their armor and weapons. Getting the needed clothing also took time. Until that point, every piece of clothing Tibbs acquired made him one of the common folks, and he couldn't and he couldn't step into a shop as one of them and ask for good quality clothing. He couldn't even claim to be the servant of someone requesting those clothing, as they wouldn't be used common folk. He had to gradually increase the quality of what he wore until his apparent station justified the clothing he wanted. Stealing them had been an option, but the city's merchants were as much victims of the city's rulers as the common folk. And those catering to the nobles would need a team to rob, and he was done with teams for now. Having the clothes adjusted to fit him was simple. Those wealthy Those of wealth who hired servants to buy their clothing weren't interested then in tagging along to be fitted. They either hired a tailor to come to fit them, or found a servant who matched them in body to be the fitting dummy. It took 2 weeks to expand his wardrobe until he could fit in any circle up to, with the right attitude, the low nobles. When he wasn't busy building his wardrobe, he inquired about the caravans and studied the transportation platforms in the hopes he could work out a way to still use it as his explanation. Those were always easier when it came to justifying things like not speaking the local language properly. If it wasn't like it wasn't like travelers from other cities could know the harsh measures in this one, could they? He was able to converse with some of the attendants when they left their buildings to eat at a tavern, and learned that a warning had been sent out to all other platforms about the city's measures. They didn't keep everyone away, but those who arrived then had to explain themselves to the guard stationed at the platform. Those who couldn't were sent back. The attendant had no choice in the matter. The caravan would be easier. He found a caravan master amicable to receiving coins in exchange for claiming the scholar had indeed traveled with her, should she be asked, and from there he found a shadowed corner he made darker with an etching, and upgraded his look to that of the scholar he'd be. He mixed in with the people shopping, buying paper, inks, quills to add to his case before heading for the main road. "Where do you think you're going?" a guard demanded, then added after looking Tibbs over, "Sir?" The level of respect was remarkably higher from when he'd been accosted as a caravan guard. "To your library," he smiled. "I'm told it's good, and I wish to take a rest from traveling for a time." The man looked him over and seemed to debate his decision. "No one told us one of you was traveling here." "I am going to Bracatia," Tibbs answered. "Their university does extensive research." He stopped as the man's annoyance rose. "But I didn't realize how exhausting traveling was, and some reading will do me good." "You're leaving with the caravan?" "I hadn't decided. More traveling is not appealing at this time." More silent debating. "Varkos!" he called to another guard, and she joined them. "Take this scholar to intake so they can decide if they want to let him stay." Tibbs didn't protest. A scholar might, even if the caravan master told them how the city was. Scholars would be arrogant in their belief intellect granted them privilege. The office was 2 blocks away, a small room with 3 bored-looking clerks. The one the guard placed him before looked at him, sighed, and took paper and quill. "Name?" "Theobald of Harshalan." "City or kingdom?" "City. It is in the kingdom of Oflantinan." "Reason for visiting the library?" "Rest and relaxation." The look said that wasn't acceptable. "I am conducting research on the forest of the kingdoms, their wildlife, the people who depend on them for their travels, the way one affects the other." "There aren't any forests close to here." "But the people travel here from them. I'm hoping that the information will have been tabulated and is available." The clerk didn't look as bored by the use of the scholar scholarly words as Tibs hoped, carefully writing down what had to be their equivalent in Fritier, the local language. He made out similarity to Itranir, but not enough to let him work out how it worked. Duration of stay, I don't know. That's not acceptable. If you're looking to stay indefinitely, that's no, I will be moving on. I simply don't know how long my research will take. The clerk wasn't pleased. I'm marking you as leaving in 1 month. If you plan on staying longer than that, return here and we'll see if we'll allow it. While the clerk wrote, Tib studied the paper. Some words were already on it, probably identifying the page as being something the city recognized. The essence in the paper felt much the same as any other, a general mix of wood with some water, air, metal, earth, and other elements. It lacked the uniformity of the paper, specifically of papers made specifically for a city the way it had been in Brokentia. Recreating them with the changes you need would be simple enough with an understanding of the language. The clerk added a stamp in dark ink that had nothing unusual about it to his sense, then handed the page to Tibs. Keep this with you. If asked, present it. If you lose it, return here so I can confirm who you are and I will reissue another permit. You will be charged for that one. I will be careful with it. Thank you. He studied the page more carefully once back in his attic. The numbers would be easy to change, since those worked the same across nearly every kingdom Tibs had traveled to. He could write them the way the clerk had, after using wood essence to let the dried ink fall through the page. He wasn't sure if he'd have to change any of the words. Hopefully, the library wouldn't be too particular about a scholar taking longer to do his research. Might even encourage it if they charge him for the privilege. If he needed to write an extensive new form, he could cut the part that needed to be the same, like the words at the top of and the stamp, and heal them onto a different page, the same way he repaired his clothing, putting the broken seam together, then adding wood essence or fever for those made of animal material, until the gap was bridged and the strands reattached. He didn't entirely understand how it worked, since he didn't have to etch anything, and what he'd read didn't make much sense to him. The scholar who wrote about it talked about the materials knowing what they should be, so that when the right essence was added, it used that to fix itself. That sounded too much like they thought essence was alive, that the item wanted to be whole. It worked, and Tibs was content with that. Along with learning the written words so he could make changes to his form if needed, getting all the pieces of clothing he needed, and getting coppers by using a silver anytime we bought a candy, learning the route of the clerk, the route the clerks took as they delivered the quains to the guardhouse, and studying who among the city's folk looked ripe to act on their dislike of the city's ruler. Tibs put on appearances as the nimble roamer. He interrupted guards in the process of abusing the position, or smartened them in public ways and even fought them at times, showing any who watched they weren't all that skilled. The guards seemed to comprise mainly people who enjoyed displaying the power their position gave them. So much for the training the city supposedly gave its guards. After a full month, they had enough copper in it to exchange 3 of the bags heading for the guards and decided on which route to target. They were far enough through the city word wouldn't reach them in time, and they traveled along busy roads. The clerk was surrounded by 6 guards, but not the common one patrolling the street. These armor were more metal than leather, and with fewer indication they'd seen combat. The people in them carried themselves with an air of authority Tibs couldn't know was deserved unless he took them on, and that was not part of the plan. The clerk held the leather bag in his arm like the heavy thing it was. The mouth was soon shut with a leather cord that ended in a complicated knot that marked it as the official payment bag. Without his ability to sense fever, he would have had to find one such knot and undo it to work out how it had been tied. That would have meant finding a way inside the city offices, then figuring out where they were kept, and getting into one of those rooms and being alone long enough to learn the knot. Even with having the element, he'd have a difficult time with most of that. Too many items with the same essence blended together at a distance, and people had enough fever in them. It made telling them and things like leather bags apart difficult where there was when there was as many of them as the city office had. There's this bag under his shirt held against his body to give him a burly was Tibbs's bag was under his shirt, held against his body to give him a burly appearance instead of giving him a noticeable bulge. He didn't feel its weight because he held it in place with essence. He paced the group, keeping his distance, as did everyone, and sensed ahead. He'd brought his sense in so he could tell people and animal apart. This repaired the fever etching as the large animal attached to the cart filled with large clay jar entered his sense. It was safe as far as his test with weaker versions of it. Yeah. It was safe as far as his test with weaker versions on smaller animals had only creating a sharp pain without causing damage. It made people curse and animals. Tibbs entered at the bullseye quarter and it bucked, kicking the cart. Tibbs weakened the wood essence and it broke, sending jars falling. An earth etching at those ensured they sent shards flying on breaking against the road. They spilled a thick liquid he hadn't realized they contained. The group hurried away, shoving themselves against people, of which Tibbs was one. He collided with the clerk, sending a weaker version of the etching into his arm As the bag of silver coins fell, Tibbs let his drop, bumping into the man again. The bag of silver didn't reach the ground, while the copper one did. The guards hurried to grab it. The clerk hurried to grab it, looking around for anyone who might show interest, as the guard formed up and pushed everyone away. Tibbs moved with the push, then slipped into an unguarded alley and made it to an unwatched section of the roofs. Covered in an etching, he ran for the next bag of copper so he could rob another city clerk. And that concludes chapter 72 of Stepping Wild. If you are liking this, if you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is available for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that, buy about 20 chapters and support me in the process that is on Ream Story. And if you are looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.